time Friday. No more traffic jams, no more rush, rush, rush. No more headaches at the office. But suddenly, all my plans for a nice weekend at home were forgotten.
Hey, what you got, Bill?
Wouldn't you know? Pete Granger. What a laugh he was having.
Good afternoon, Mr. Duncan.
And just my luck, Miss Monroe had to see it, too. I'd been meaning to buy a new garbage can, but, well, what would Betty say?
Bill Duncan, where have you been? I've been waiting all morning for you, and I'm so terribly upset. Do you know what's going on outside? That garbage can's a mess, the red label's on it, the neighbors have been calling, and I just don't
Betty
know.
said plenty.
My parents have been calling me up. They said this...
Whoa, wait a minute. There's someone downtown I know can take care of this. Health Department, Mr. Foster, please. Friend of mine, Larry Foster. He was a big football star in college. He works for the Health Department now. Larry, Bill Duncan. Say, fella, what goes on here? Some of your people have been nosing around my yard.
Yes, Bill. Yes, I know. Well, we've got the report right here, ready for filing. Well, let's talk about it. I'll drop by your place on my way home. It's just a reminder that improperly stored garbage provides food for rats, flies, and other disease-carrying insects.
While Larry talked, my son Stevie and the Granger boy stood around bug-eyed with hero worship. Well, Larry coached the kids in the neighborhood in their football league. It was as if Johnny Unitas had come to our block. Well, thanks for the advice, Larry.
Bill, why, Mr. Foster's here. Why don't you show him the yard?
Our yard was Betty's pride and joy. No visitor to our home could escape without first taking the grand tour.
Look here. Any container holding water can produce mosquitoes, including Aedes aegypti, which carries the germs of dengue and yellow fever from man to man. In fact, these look like the larvae right now. We've already identified some in this neighborhood.
Betty, I guess, was having some second thoughts about our invitation. Especially when Larry spotted some breadcrumbs Betty had put out for the birds.
If there are any hungry rats around, now watch out.
I saw one yesterday. Frankie Granger. Honest, Miss Duncan. You're making that up.
Rodents don't recognize boundaries, Mrs. Duncan. They'll invade any neighborhood.
Larry went on to tell us a lot more about the biology and habits of rats, flies, mosquitoes, and other threats to public health when suddenly I noticed the two boys taking off as though shot out of a cannon. But on one thing, Betty and I were agreed. If anyone in the neighborhood was helping to breed these pests, it must be the neighbors. Frankie told his dad about the rat, but depend on Pete Granger to weasel out of it.
Must be the neighbors.
Next morning, I had a talk with Pete Granger about what Stevie had told me.
You're a fine one to talk, Bill Duncan, if you kept your yard half as clean as mine.
See those tiny dark wigglers? They're probably disease-carrying mosquitoes. They breed in water. You'd pull your plug or cover your boat, Pete.
Oh, yeah? Well, at least I don't get red tags on my garbage cans.
If Pete and I didn't exactly see eye to eye, our boys joined hands that morning in a common cause, an expedition, along with other kids on the block, to survey each boy's yard. At the Costellos, a tire containing stagnant water, a favorite breeding place for domestic mosquitoes. Ditto for their wading pool. At the Mulligans, food left out for their dog, an invitation to insects and rats. At the Jacobsons, scrap lumber, a good hiding place for rats who fed at a nearby garbage can. The vacant lot next door with overgrown weeds, cluttered with bottles, tin cans, discarded auto parts and appliances, each containing stagnant water. From yard to yard the boys went, gathering new recruits on the way. At the Morrisons, their septic tank had overflowed, now a breeding place for the Culex mosquito that carries the germs of encephalitis or sleeping sickness. At the Digby's, children's playthings, but each also a menace, for all of these containers could produce mosquitoes. But when each boy confronted his parent, the answer was about the same.
It must be the neighbors, son.
Oh, darling, it isn't us. It's the neighbors.
However, there was one yard in which the boys couldn't get. Miss Monroe's next door.
Okay, boys, take 10.
That Saturday afternoon, I saw Larry Foster doing football practice. I asked him what the city was doing to keep our neighborhood clean.
The city provides ordinances and regulations for the guidance of the individual household, Bill. At the health department, we put out information for TV, radio, and the newspapers. We also make periodic inspections of the premises. Then, of course, the city collects your garbage twice a week, your rubbish once a week, and disposes of it by sanitary methods. Now, if it weren't for that service, any modern city would soon become a shambles. But the job of keeping your property free from health hazards is mainly yours, Bill. Now, the good citizen recognizes that fact and does all that he can to safeguard the health of his family and the whole neighborhood.
As Larry went on to paint a grim picture of the various serious diseases carried from man to man by pests such as mosquitoes, rats, and flies, he had a spellbound audience. It wasn't long before our neighbors, taking their cue from the youngsters, got the message. Throughout our neighborhood, there was a general cleanup and improvement campaign. As for the Duncans, we had also learned a lesson. I had purchased a new garbage container, and each day Betty took pains to drain and wrap our garbage carefully. Before putting it into the container that sat on a new cart I had purchased. A protection against rats and prowling dogs. No more breadcrumbs in our yard either. For Betty had a bird feeder now, taking care not to let it overflow. But there was still a problem. The yard next door. As tightly guarded as Fort Knox. With all sorts of water-holding containers. Something Larry Foster said had burned itself into Betty's mind.
Like most people, no doubt you thought that all mosquitoes came from stagnant pools along the creek and on the street. But any container holding stagnant water can produce the yellow fever and other mosquitoes.
However, I didn't count on the resourcefulness of one Mrs. Bill Duncan. For next morning, she had Miss Monroe in for coffee. Soon, for the good of Miss Monroe and the whole neighborhood, Betty convinced her of certain things. That a bird bath should be scrubbed clean at least once a week. That water and pet dishes should be changed daily. That water-holding containers should be eliminated wherever possible. And that many plants should be grown in earth or sand instead of water. Miss Monroe's yard, our own yard. 2 down and 1 to go.
Hi, Bill.
Pete Granger, a hard nut to crack. However, when the Grangers invited us over to a weenie roast that Sunday afternoon, I found that Pete had also seen the light.
Got some dear. Do a good job, son, and careful about those food scraps.
Well, congratulations, Pete. I see you've learned your lesson.
See here, Bill Duncan, if you kept your yard half as clean as I keep mine...
And that goes double for you, Mr. Granger.
Took the kids to wake us up, Bill. It's time we quit passing the buck. Keeping this neighborhood clean is up to all the folks on this block. Each and every one of us.
What about your own?